Hey, one other thing. Let me on key. I hope I'm in there. Let me on key. I got one other thing. On the way down to Quartzsite, about, we'll say 50 miles, 60 miles north of Quartzsite, my 40-foot motorhome Caterpillar got a furball, to say the least. My engine blew up in my motorhome. It sure did. It still looks good. It just won't move and go down the road. But hey, that's another story for another time. But anyway, that's the name of that game. I'm going to downsize. I'm going to move out of the 40-foot motorhome and move into a Volkswagen van and call it the Cremelatium. Y'all take care on the net. I really enjoy listening to the Triple Nickel Net. I look forward to it every Thursday night. Back to net control from N4 SVD and come to Quartzsite every once in a while. It'll do you good.
Well, AC, that's quite a report, and we really appreciate it. Enthusiasm for a hamfest such as Quartz Fest is, fairly important. There are those, well, anyway, 850. Wow. I am so sorry to hear about the problem you had with your RV. I'm hoping you're not just going to, push it over to the side of a cliff and then heave ho. But if you don't need a big thing and you don't feel like repairing it, then perhaps getting something new is going to be better for you. And certainly something that you can use to hang out there at the Quartzsite Quartz Fest. Thanks for the report. And also, I appreciate the kind words. KJ6OOV Fred. Hopefully you've forgiven me. Welcome and go ahead.
Well, good evening, Mike, and everyone on net. I think you do need those couple of laps around the block to wake up, but all's forgiven, no problem. And good to hear you, AC, and I was glad to see you down there. And if anyone does get to Quartzsite in the future, look for AC's palm tree. That's a landmark out there. If you see it, you know you're in the right place. I was down there all week. I spent about 9 days there. Weather was good this year. I gave a brief report last week from there. The cell coverage was poor for me this year down there, and I think probably because there were so many people in the cell when they split up the bandwidth, there just wasn't much when everybody was on. But there were over like 120 different seminars that were given by very good speakers. There were 4 venues that were going simultaneously. There were a couple in the morning, a couple in the afternoon, and 1 or 2 in the evening. I had a wonderful time. There was one digital voice seminar that covered hotspots and everything from the analog hotspots through the DMR and D-Star hotspots, the DV Megas, the open spots, and so forth with the demonstration. So that was an interesting seminar. All the others were interesting. There were several DXers and contesters that gave talks about propagation, about operating techniques, about HF rigs and stations, antennas, excellent antenna seminars. Also, there's a tremendous amount of now my mind's going blank, the little helicopters that were flying all around. Those are really interesting to watch, and at night they light up, and they're really, really colorful. That was interesting. Good campfires, great camaraderie. AC said over 850 people that signed in, and just a sea of RVs, campfires going everywhere, and people just having a lot of fun. There was an off-road day trail that, I don't know, probably 40, 50 people went on, maybe 20, 30 vehicles all day long, went up to one of the peaks and came back. A talk on Quartzsite history. Some of you may know, maybe not, there were camels in Quartzsite. They were brought in as an animal that were going to take over like the burros, but they didn't make it. Their hooves don't they don't have hooves. They have soft feet, and the rock out there is bad for their feet. But in any event, that's what I did. Had a wonderful time. Would recommend it for anybody. And if anybody has questions, I'd be glad to answer them. But Mike, back to you. KJ6OLV, back to net.
W4WWM recognized. Well, Fred, thank you for that report. And I'm not sure about the AC's palm tree. If it's marked in a manner in which we can identify it as belonging to AC, but I will certainly keep my eye out for it. And frankly, after listening to AC's report, if it wasn't for Super Bowl weekend, which really is more of the party than the game for me, but still, can't do it this weekend. But next weekend, now I've just got to get up and leave because I've got to, I got to meet him. But and Fred, thank you though for the report. And I'm glad you had a great time. Of course, maybe I should ask for stations that had a bad time. I don't know if that would be appropriate. W4WWM, thanks for joining us. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that, Mike. I just wanted to check in, and I've been hearing a lot about the site out there, the court site, and quite a lot of activity sounds like, and it sounds like a wonderful place to try to visit one of these years. So my question to the gentleman that I guess there was were there plenty of rooms for all the RVs to park? There wasn't any areas that were too crowded that couldn't get around in and out with the RVs. And also wondering if people put up stations that they can operate like the HF or stuff like that. Maybe we can tune in on HF next year and try talking to some of the people out there during the site visits. W4WW site visit.
N4.
Oh, very good. Well, no problem keying up. Ultimately it proved to be worthwhile. So N4SVD, I think, has a hot skinny for you. N4SVD, go ahead.
There's plenty of room out there in the desert. There's plenty of room. You can be as close to somebody or as far away from them as you want to. There's every kind of mobile antenna or base station type antenna. There were all kinds of antennas out there as far as doing HF. There are a lot of YouTube videos. If you just look up Quartz Fest on YouTube, there are a number from last year, the year before, and some from this year. If you just check out on YouTube. And W6GPS, Dawn came all the way from Chattanooga to demonstrate the Kenwood D74 as well as the Shark open spot and other open hot spots. And one final comment, and I'm trying to go viral. There is my video on YouTube. All you got to do is just look up N4SVD. Look up N4SVD, and it'll show you what kind of shenanigans goes on out there in Quartzsite. I'm trying to go viral. Right now it's 650 or 660 hits. And if we can get over 1,000, I'll consider myself viral. Just look up N4SVD. It's an 8-minute video, but maybe you'll get a chuckle out of it and tell your friends. N4SVD, back to net. Thanks for letting me recheck.
Well, thanks for helping out with the questions, and we will check out the YouTube video. At least I will after the roundtable concludes. Thanks for being with us. All right, anything else from Quartz Fest? Anybody come away with a treasure that you just couldn't believe that you'd find there? And or did anyone have any stories to tell about the RV parking? And which, of course, is the key. You can't just hang around overnight there. Would have to get a room if you're not actually in an RV or a camper, or perhaps even camping's available. But any more stories from Quartz Fest? We'll take you now. Please key up. Alrighty, nothing there. All right, N6HQ, sorry about that. We had a double and some audio difficulties momentary at worst. So, let's see. I think it was KK9TT that keyed up. If so, thanks for keying up, even though we doubled. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Mike. I hope I'm getting through. This is Joe, KK9 Tango Tango, and we were down at Quartz Fest again. I just turned the radio on, so I don't know what was said about it, but I did hear you mention AC, and I suppose you know that last voice you heard with the charming accent was the man himself, and it was good to see him there on the last day, or the night before the last day. So he's listening and working with you there. N4SVD. Anyway, we had a great time, and as far as the RV stuff goes, we had our motorhome there, and there's just no problem finding a place to park. And you can park in any orientation you want. The ground is all hard, easy to drive on, a little dusty, especially when it gets windy, but you don't have to worry about sinking in or anything like that, and all kinds of good seminars, including some oddball stuff that I really enjoyed about our plans for landing on Mars and the geology of the area and the wildlife of the area, and some stuff as we watch the space station go overhead and satellites, and so I won't continue at the risk of repeating what was already said, but I just think for me, and I'm a veteran of Dayton many years, and Orlando's Hamcation, and of course Yuma, and several other Hamfests. This is the top of my list. I get more out of it and have more fun so I'm giving it 5 stars. This is KK9 Tango Tango, RV Mobile tonight in Las Vegas. Back to net control, Mike.
All right, Joe, you made it fine, and we appreciate the report. And it seems that even for those stations that are not just in the western half of the U.S., find the Quartz Fest to be an increasingly important and interesting and fun and entertaining and educational, for that matter. Of course, it depends upon the kind of stories that are told at the campfires, but it's quite the Hamfest, if I could call it that. And we're excited about it. I hope next year a lot of more people will pile in there, and I'm hoping to be able to join everybody, because that isn't too far away from me. In fact, it's not even quite a 5-hour drive at most, maybe even less. Of course, there's a little issue of having to get an RV or a camper put together, but we'll see what we can do. All right, Joe, thanks for being with us. All right, any final thoughts on Quartz Fest before we move on? Please key up.
KJ600.
KJ600V, go ahead.
Mike in the net. The other thing that is going on simultaneously with the Ham Radio Quartz Fest is the Gem and Mineral Show in town. That's a draw just for people that are interested in jewelry and gems in general. Also, the RV show. There is an annual RV show that's huge in Quartzsite that occurs at the same time as Quartz Fest, so you can get 3 for 1 there. The prices to enter Quartz Fest are ham friendly, no charge whatsoever. The camping is free, and there's no entrance fee or gate fee to participate in Quartz Fest. RV would be ideal. There were many people that were car camping and tent camping. The closest hotel or motel would be Blythe. That'd be 25, 30 miles away. Wouldn't recommend trying that. But lots of interesting things to do for hams, for the XYLs in town or RVers. Some of the seminars are for RVers. For example, on battery technology, lithiums, AGMs, on refrigerator technology, the LP refrigerators, how to protect them and prevent fires, solar panels, solar systems, all kinds of stuff. So I would recommend it, and do plan on it next year. KJ60OV, back to net.
All righty, mark your calendars. Thanks, Fred. All right, are there any other, well, let's look forward. Are there ham fairs, hamventions, hamfests, get-togethers coming up that we should be mindful of that are coming up that perhaps we can get reports from during the course of those things, or ones that maybe we might not notice by, just word of mouth, but should maybe consider going to? If you'd like to talk about something happening in your neck of the woods, please key up. All right, anything seen or heard, certainly the ARRL newsletter and email reports, or email blasts, really, that they send out. They usually have a fairly long list along with live links to any kind of ham fair, hamvention, ham fest, or whatever you like to call them, get-togethers, whether ARRL sponsored or not, are usually available. So if you can attend and then maybe help us out with a report, I'd sure appreciate it. So are there any new devices, gears, hotspots, access points, or other stuff that, the generic ham radio stuff, but limited to digital voice, that we should be thinking about? Did you get something brand new in your hot little hands, or did you read an announcement of something that is a little bit more substantial than vaporware, but is coming around the corner that we should be discussing? If so, please key up.
Good afternoon, Mike. Z01 Hotel November.
Hey, Brian, Z01HN. Thanks for joining us. Go ahead.
Very good there, Mike. Well, I just received today a new MMDVM board. It's one from Bruce. There's the extra 2 ICs, so it's got 4 ICs on the board, and they say there's an enhanced filter. Pretty good. Saying that it's going to deliver better BER figures overall. So I've only had 2 contacts on it out of the box. And it plugs straight into the Raspberry Pi. So no need for the Uno board anymore. I have got a question though. I've been looking around the net and read a few articles here and there, and I'm wondering what the recommended audio level into the board is. The tape radio puts out 1,000 millivolts of audio, the 6th level. I know it's adjustable by the pots, but I thought I'd try and give it a level closer to what's intended over.
All right, so I got MMDVM board, but I didn't copy which one you got. I missed that, Brian. I'm sorry, Z01HN. So which one did you get again? Go ahead.
I got the MMDVM from Bruce Gibbon. It's the one with the new filter. It's got 4 ICs on the board and also the microprocessor, so you no longer do you need an Uno. It just plugs on the top of the Raspberry Pi bus. Over.
Alrighty, with that clarification, are there stations that can recommend an audio level input into the board for Z01HN? Please key up. Well, I didn't get a response, so I guess Z01HN that either it's not been a problem or nobody cares or they haven't bothered looking it up, but have you given it a try? Are you running it right now? Back to you.
No, I'm not running it right now. I'm using our normal repeater. Well, what I did, in fact, is I backed the audio off so it wouldn't work, and then I just brought it up a little bit. But I just thought it would be nice to give it the recommended level. But that's a figure that's a bit elusive as far as I haven't been able to find it anywhere, and I really don't know. I guess I could send off an email and they would answer that. But I thought there's so many technical folks on this net that it was a question that would go down all right. Over.
Well, I agree with you that there are a lot of them, but not sometimes those with the answers that you seek to questions aren't with us. We have a fair number of those that listen to the podcast, and others that rely upon Broadcastify. And I should mention the Broadcastify audio feed is back up and working. And so we're glad to report that those that might want to listen there or maybe play back, well, all but maybe the first 15 or 20 minutes or so can do so. But, one of the things that I really recommend is that if you listen to the podcast or other digital recording of this net and you hear a question, such as the one that Z01HN posed, and you know the answer, it just takes a quick moment to shoot over to the Roundtable forum board. Again, roundtable.tech, TECH. The shout box is open 24/7. We clean it out after the end of each net, but you can post a quick reply there without having to compose an email or try to find an appropriate thread someplace. And and if you know the answer and don't think you can join us on a subsequent Thursday, just go right there. You can even crank out a quick answer on your cell phone using your favorite browser there or on your computer. So I recommend it and hope that people will take advantage of that and can help those out that have questions but perhaps can't get answers. All right, well, Brian, thanks for joining us. All right, anybody else with anything new they'd like to tell us about? Please key up.
K6JM.
And we say howdy to K6JM. Go ahead.
Okay, Mike. Just following up on Brian's question, I don't have the definitive answer about how many millivolts that board needs. I've read it, but I just did not retain it. But what I do with the MMDVM boards is I start with V-Star because it's by far the easiest to get going. If I can get it to link, I'll link it to the E module of any REF reflector. And it's a kind of a parrot type deal. Every REF reflector E module will record and repeat back. And so it's very easy to adjust audio levels until everything sounds good. So that's it's not very technical, and I'm sure you already know that, Brian, but that's how I do it. No, this is not new, but this is new for me. Just downloaded, I've used almost everything is through a Raspberry Pi on my hotspots. But this time, I loaded the pre-beta version of BlueDV for Windows onto my Windows 10 machine and plugged a Northwest Digital ThumbDV into my Windows machine, and I'm talking to you that way right now. And it works really nice. It's a beautiful little job. He calls it pre-beta, but it looks pretty solid to me. Back to you, Mike. K6JM.
Well, not only does it look solid, but you sound solid. What a great, strong audio that I'm hearing, and no distortion at all. You're louder than others, but from my perspective, that's great. Well, thank you for telling us about that. And, you have so many gadgets. I bet you have hotspots and access points you haven't even bothered to put together, but we appreciate hearing about that. Anyone else with any reports about new gear devices, things that you sniffed out of, some website that we should perhaps keep our eyes on? Let us know. Please key up. All right, didn't see or hear anything. We had a couple of doubles. Let me just see if there are stations that keyed up that were not recognized. If so, please key up again. Do so now. Alrighty, thank you. I didn't, nobody keyed up, and I didn't think I'd missed anybody, but you just never know. All right, we are going to move now to any follow-up to last week's discussions. As I mentioned, there are a lot of people that listen to us later on, and sometimes they hear topics, discussions, questions, and have, a V8 moment where they put their palm to their face, but in a good way, thinking that, if I had only been on that net live, I could have, provided some answers, help, information, discussion, and I'd sure like to do that now. And so those that listen recorded but are with us tonight would like to put their 2 cents in on a topic that we brought up last Thursday, or if there's more information to something that perhaps you presented that would complete your discussion from last Thursday, but it wasn't available to you then, and you are with us now, now is the time. Please key up. Well, nothing from that. In fact, actually, I bet we have never had a key up to this, but every time I don't provide an opportunity to talk about things from last Thursday, I get emails saying, "Hey." There is a topic though from last time that we talked about the Zoom Spot clones and the warnings from G4KLX and KI6NUM about illegal software and knockoffs that are unauthorized and not permitted under the licensing of the creators of the Zoom Spot. I haven't heard or seen any more, and I was wondering if anyone has learned anything new about these and any efforts made to get them off the market, or if the Zoom Spots that are the authentic ones are being shipped and are basically or are available at HRO. I know there's a lot of interest in them. I thought we'd pause for a moment to see if there were any updates to our discussion from last week. Please key up. Well, not hearing or seeing anything, I presume that there's nothing new. I didn't see any extra postings in the Yahoo group that this issue has been discussed. So, I did get a request to talk about kerchunking. And I don't know that this is necessarily a topic. Perhaps it's more of a G-Star basics when we were doing that sort of thing. And actually a couple of stations wanted to talk about kerchunking both as a good operating practice and in which circumstances that would be true, and is a poor operating practice. And this is generated from stations that are just chunking repeatedly the constellation, and it's not really clear why they're doing that. They're not announcing their call, not seemingly seeking a contact, and it's not really certain why that occurs. And I thought that perhaps it might be a good time to comment a bit on Kerchunking and where we would hear it as kind of a time-honored way of checking that, let's say, an analog repeater is linked, or for how Kerchunking would help you with a hotspot, and perhaps come to, maybe come up with some help for those that, instead of just Kerchunking, can find a way to test out their hotspots or the G-Star repeaters, and do so without just annoying the heck out of everyone. Because as you know, the ICOM radios have a so-called Kerchunk feature, but it's not in a pejorative sense. It's the announcement you hear that when somebody keys up, their call sign is voice ID if you have that turned on, which is on by default in your ICOM radios. And at least you get an announcement of who's out there Kerchunking, but if you're just doing it repeatedly, it is annoying to some. So I thought I'd take some comments about Kerchunking, both good and bad, that is, good practice and bad practice, and then give you some insight as to perhaps the best way to handle Kerchunking and avoid it, if possible, on a linked system. So, stations, without Kerchunking, please Kerchunk. Let us key up now.
W4GMI.
Well, to start us off, we have David, W4GMI. Thanks for being with us. Go ahead.
Oh, Mike, I think so much of you. That is one of my pet peeves. I hear this all the time, and I make a comment to the Kerchunker that they can unlink from the reflector and go to the echo module and Kerchunk and test and talk all they want to make sure their hotspot or whatever is working. But my suggestion is unlink from the reflector and go to your echo module and do all the testing you want. Problem is that we're not stewards of our own housekeeping, and we continue to let it go on, and people just don't know any better. And I've been called the ham cop and everything else, but you got such as 1 Charlie with all these, or 30 Charlie with all these repeaters linked to it, and nobody wants to hear all that across the world. So yeah, disconnect from your reflector and go to your echo module and have at it all you want to. W4GMI, thank you, Mike, for bringing that up.
Well, you can thank the stations that send me emails asking that I bring it up as well. So, comments on Kerchunking. I mean, there are, it's not all bad, although for those that are annoyed by it, it is bad. But what do you think, Kerchunking? How can we get around it? Is it just don't do it? Or is there maybe some other way to more courteously key up without looking for contact? And well, anyway, you guys know what I'm looking for, but I want to hear from you guys. And if it's just plain annoying, that's fine too. But it's something that's really more of a, it's an operating practice. It's courteous ways. Well, you guys, I already explained. So I'm not going to go back over it again. Instead, I'm going to call for you to tell me what you think. Please speak up.
KK9PT.
I have KG5SLG and KK9TT. First we say howdy to Elmer, KG5SLG. Go ahead.
Kurt Chunk, KG5SLG, Rio Rancho, New Mexico. Good evening, Annette. Thank you for letting me on. I think really what a lot of people do, I think they're testing the waters. That's the best way to describe it. I see that everywhere. You're not going to get it. Well, first of all, let's clarify something. You're not going to get them to stop. No matter how many times you ask, are you going to talk, or you can throw your call sign out there. A lot of times they won't do that. I think everybody knows who's heard me on the Constellation. Usually pretty out there pretty early, and I'll key up and put my call sign out there to test the waters to see if anybody's listening. But actually, I don't mind myself. I don't mind the kerchunking because of exactly what you said, the voice announcement. I'll look at the call sign. If I see a familiar call sign, I'll probably go back and answer. If I don't see a familiar call sign, I'll look to see where that person's from. I'll say, oh, this might be interesting, so I'll key up. I'll call that call sign. But I think a lot of people are shy. I think that's kind of why they do it. You know, they won't be the first talker out on that particular reflector. So rather than talk, they'll just kerchunk. And most of the time, I hear a lot of guys say, they'll call that guy's call sign back. They'll come back. So I think for a lot of guys, because I wouldn't say it's radio friendly, they still think they want to be the first one out of the reflector to start the QSO. I think that's mainly just it. KG5SLG, that's just my opinion. Back to that.
W6.
W6KD is recognized. Well, you know, Elmer, you're right, but then again, one kerchunk I don't think is the issue, and I agree with you. This can't be stopped, and sometimes people expect the radios to start lighting up and announcing your call, but it's the frequent and repeated kerchunking that is the complaint. Just testing the waters, who cares? But it's the repeated one that you know, we see, and you got to remember, you're in a linked system. You're keying up all kinds of stuff, and then linked to this linked system are other linked systems that have connected with permission. And a lot of reflectors are, you know, with radios are just going crazy when you do it repeatedly. But thanks for your comments. KK9TT is next up. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I echo a lot of what Elmer said there. To me, it's like the guy ahead of you, you know, who doesn't put his turn signal on when he's turning. Very aggravating, and yet not likely you're ever going to get some portion of the populace to change that. Part of the issue, I think, is that, you know, sometimes I wonder, I don't mind if somebody says this is KK9TT testing, once or twice, and you know that that's what he's doing. And I especially am happy to hear when somebody says, this is KK9TT, and I just got a brand new radio here, and I want to make sure it's working. Does anybody hear me? Great. And then I feel like we have an obligation, really, that somebody should come back to that poor soul and let him know that he's getting out. What's missing is people that I never know if somebody is kerchunking because they want to start a QSO, or they just want to see if their call sign shows up on the reflector dashboard, and I'm guilty of that on occasion. Or they, I don't know what other reason they would be doing it, or they're just testing somehow. But I think part of it is we don't have a good protocol for as we do on HF, for basically calling CQ. It's like when I hear somebody's call sign on here with a kerchunk, it's like, well, does he want to talk to somebody, or is he just doing that for fun, or is he, you know, what's going on? So I like to kind of throw that into the mix here in the conversation. I don't have a solution, unfortunately. Back to net control, Mike.
KC8Y.
KC8YQL recognized. Well, Joe, I appreciate that, and you know, you could be right, and of course, you know, that kind of key up especially with audio testing, whatever. Hey, no, that's fine. At least we know that the thing's working. But, well, we'll see where we go with this. We have, next up is W6KD. Welcome, Bob. Go ahead.
Hey, good evening, Mike, and everybody on the net. A couple of thoughts on this. First of all, I think I mentioned last week or the week before last, my thoughts that, link systems and D-Star in general, one of the things that it really does, bring to the table is the ability to aggregate users from all around the world. A guy in Nebraska plus a guy in Florida plus a guy in, Germany, whatever. But you have to consider also that when you aggregate large numbers of stations into a pool and a reflector or a link system of reflectors, you're also aggregating the behavior into that one place as well. So, think through what it would be like. It's no big deal if one or two people kerchunk every now and then, but take that and multiply it times 50 or 100, and it makes things a whole different situation. So, because there are a large number of people on these reflectors, if everybody were to do that, it would be a real problem. Second, if you're driving down the road in a vehicle, or if you have an older radio, like all of my D-Star radios, it doesn't tell you the call sign. I don't get a voice response on the 2820 or on the ICOM 92 when somebody does a kerchunk. I don't hear his call sign. And if you're driving down the road, you hear it, but you don't. You're not going to catch the call sign as it goes by. So, a quick key up works great on the net here when people are watching for it. When net control in particular is watching for it, not so much day to day, and if you're one of the people that increasingly is inhabiting the constellation, truck drivers, RVers, etc., that key up times 100 gets kind of annoying. And then last, the premise that there's nothing we can do about it is just flat wrong. I could very easily code into the reflector code something that watches for kerchunks, a key up with a duration less than a certain, less than a second or less than a half a second, and count it. And if somebody does that more than a certain number of times a day, it automatically locks them out of the reflector. The means technically to solve this problem is there. This is not like an FM repeater. So, if we all decided that we didn't want that behavior, yes, there is something we could do about it. So, we reset. But I don't think it needs to come to that. The bottom line is if, folks will just, be considerate and remember that there's users out there that, if your intent is to announce your presence, it doesn't work for the trucker driving down the road. It doesn't work for the guy walking around his house like me right now with an ICOM 92. You're going to hear it go beep, and by the time you look at your radio, it's too late. You're not going to know who that was. So, every now and then, there's probably a good reason every now and then to do it. But yeah, if everybody did it, it would get unbearable very quickly. So please don't. Back to the net, W6KD.
K6.
K6JM recognized. Bob, appreciate your thoughts. Well taken. Next up is KC8YQL. Go ahead.
Okie dokie, Mike. I'm pretty sure, well, in fact, I'm 100% sure you guys are talking about physically keying the radios or hotspots. But I thought for sure my professional flight simulator man would nail this one, and I don't think he mentioned it. One of my pet peeves is, for heaven's sakes, and it's not really prevalent in the guys that's been on digital network for a while. So many of the new people get the new radio, and you already know what I'm going to say, Mike. Should I even say it, or should I just pass it back to you and you can say it? PTT only on GPS. KC8YQL, back to that.
KG5.
KG5, SLG recognized. Well, of course, you're talking about beaconing, Bill, and we've talked about that before. No beaconing on a linked system ever. You will get the ire of everybody, including people that you would never think would get upset about beaconing. And you know, I haven't seen too many cases of beaconing. It comes up maybe once every couple months, and frankly, unless they respond promptly after we try to email them, and just as a side note on this, if you don't keep your email current in QRZ, and that's where we go, that's where most administrators of repeaters and reflectors go, unless you're a member of a group, to locate your email, and then they send you an email saying, hey, you got your beaconing on. If you don't respond, you're going to get muted. That's a capability that is inherent, especially in the XLX DX realm, and is, you know, part of the even the G2 G3 software on a D plus. Although it's you know, you got to log in the console and there's a little more to it, but nevertheless, you can be blocked in D plus and muted, and or blocked, I guess. Although, you know, we're a bit more polite here in YouTube. And then we have to put a notice on the shout box and elsewhere because we're not sure if you got the word, and to let us know you've got the beaconing fixed, and then we'll unmute you. But that's that. This is for chunking. Anyway, Bill, thank you for commenting on that and reminding everybody about the issue of beaconing, which is, I guess, is a kind of a subset of chunking. Whole different game, because in chunking, as has been mentioned, is purposeful. You're keying up the hotspot, the radio, the whatever, and just doing so repeatedly, seemingly for no reason, because we don't know why you're doing it. Thanks, Bill. K6JM. Go ahead.
Okay, Mike. It's a great conversation. A lot of good points people have been making. I'll make another one that, you know, if you really want to see if your system is working, a great way to chunk is just to disturb only the people on your local RF repeater, if that's what you're doing. There are people out there who are doing this to see if they're making their Hilltop repeater, but they program their radio to use RPT2 with the gateway there, so it goes out to whatever that repeater gateway is linked to. So all they have to do is program the repeater. It works with either memories or DR mode to have RPT2 blank. Then you just chunk your local repeater, and maybe people get used to that, but you won't be waking up all those many tens and maybe hundreds of other repeaters and hotspots around the world. So that's one thing. I would also agree. Somebody said the E module, the REF D plus reflectors, the E module is a parrot or a repeater, and that's a great way to find out if your system is working. It's a way lot nicer to people, and it's easy. So there's just no reason to be chunking to see if your system is making it, is working. Just use the E module, as was said before. Let's see. If you are going to chunk and you kind of like a QSO, at least have the courtesy to say your call sign. And something, Mike, you mentioned a couple of years ago on the round table was, you know, don't just say your call sign, but say something interesting. Like I'm driving through such and such a town, or curious if anybody, you know, just something to make it interesting to have somebody come back to you. And then finally, I have to say, when I got into ham radio, which was, it's not clear, fuzzy memory, 1958 or 1959, on HF, first CW and then phone, we all just used EQ. And then when I got back into ham radio in 2003, I learned that on VHF and UHF, you don't just say CQ, you say your call sign and say, is anybody out there? And you can do that today on D-Star. Anyway, back to you, Mike. This is K6JM.
All right, Jim, good points. And just as a side note, your audio now is very hot, and you're splattering just a bit. So you might want to turn the gain down just a hair. you're loud, and but now you're really loud, and so I thought I'd just let you know because I really don't want people having to, well, back down on their audio and then miss out on another station. So I know you'll take care of that and take that in the good, um, in the positive sense it was mentioned, and not critical at all. KG5 SLG, you're next. Go ahead.
Thanks again, Mike. Sorry about that. First of all, I'd like to apologize in that my voice is finally somewhat recovering after battling the flu for about 3 days, so hopefully back in the water here. Shout out to W6KD, always enjoy talking to Bob. But this time I'm going to somewhat agree with Bob, and I'm not going to agree with Bob. Confrontation on what I meant earlier about them just out of habit. What I'm particularly talking about is just human behavior, not necessarily radio habit. Hey, it's kind of like the best way to describe it, you're telling a child that they can't do something. Well, some listen, some don't. That's all I'm going to say on that subject. I do not want to get in the business of policing my repeater and telling people what they can and cannot do. That's not why I put a repeater up. I put a repeater up there so that it can use for the ham community. There are other tools that hams also, what I've discovered, are not aware of. They're not aware there's dashboards, there's or just about every type of connection you have on D-Star, DMR, or any of these digital radio formats. It's just, to me, a lot of it depends on how well you're educated, how much effort you're willing to put into. But I see a lot of hams, when I tell them, how do you know who's there? I say, well, there's this dashboard you can go up to and look to see who's actually there. A lot of times in the mornings when I power up my DC, the first thing that comes up on the web page I have at home prior to a couple of dashboards where I can actually just look to see who's on there. Some are a little more easier to work, some are not. But a lot of it I find is new hams getting in and not getting educated and understanding the hobby very well. This goes back to the old saying, you pick up the 2-meter radio, give a shout out, is this frequency busy? It's no different on D-Star. That's kind of how I feel about it. KG5 SLG, that's all for me for tonight. I'm going to sign off. I hit the rack a little early tonight. Everybody have a good evening. And one more thing, let me reset. A gentleman earlier today, and I'm trying to remember his call sign. He was from England, and he was mentioning that he was, M3JCA calling. I've had very nice conversations with him. He had mentioned, he was asking me why would people sit there on one Charlie and just completely keep keying the radio. It's funny that kind of came up in the conversation tonight. And my answer was probably somebody either had a radio in their pocket and didn't realize they were punching it, or exactly that they were pushing the button because they were testing something. So those are my thoughts. Always enjoy the net, and shout out to everybody. KG5 SOG. Good evening to the net.
Well, I hope you don't have the flu. It's about killing off everybody else, not literally, of course. Well, I've never heard of butt dialing on or butt keying up on an HT. I know that it happens frequently on cell phones, but I guess it's possible. And it is odd, but Chunky's talked about it a lot. And sometimes you wonder, is it because the station's trying to see if his or her call sign will appear on a dashboard? And as you know, depending upon the software behind the dashboard and the reflector the dashboard is reporting on, it could be instantaneous. It could take quite a long time before your call sign would show up. Here on the Constellation, it's pretty instantaneous. But I don't get that as a reason. I mean, why would you ka-chunk repeatedly until you get your call sign to show up? Are you too shy to give your call sign? That doesn't make a lot of sense. But anyway, I'm just throwing things out that would be strange, including, I guess, butt keying up. And but we appreciate your comments. And I should note that, look, the reason why we're having this discussion is not only because there are stations that emailed me with topics, and this was one of them, but also to exhibit that we try to be fair about things here on the Kings of Digital System, the Constellation of X Reflectors. We don't want to put up signs that say rules. For those that have been with us for a while, you know that we don't police the constellation to the extent where we jump on people at every violation. And quite frankly, most of the people that hang out here are real pros in the amateur radio business. And, people ignore those that, don't exhibit courteous conduct and good operating practices. I mean, one way of, ruining your digital radio experience on whatever mode is to, conduct yourself with poor operating practices. Now, if you're new to it and you didn't spend the time listening to see how stations operate here, well, perhaps you should, stand down for a little bit to see. But if you just charge forward and just chunk your way through reflector system after repeater and link systems, you're going to be an unwelcome person, and you don't want to ever be in that position. So I guess part of this is to seek help in just not repeatedly kerchunking. And if there's something you're trying to accomplish by the repeated kerchunking, just, key up and say what it is you like to try to do and why you're trying to do it. It's no embarrassment. Nobody's going to jump down your throat. On the other hand, if it gets to be a constant annoyance and stations leave the system, many of them, they're going to turn us off. I actually get emails or texts, and I'm saying, hey, I've been told, hey, this one station's acting up, and I just can't take them to go somewhere else. And you know what it is? They're trying to get us to do something, and we really hate to do something. Instead, the best way to deal with it is to guide or coach the station, and if we can do it, off the air, so much the better. But it's anyway. You guys get the idea. All right. Any final thoughts or any thought? Well, we don't have to end this now. It seems I'm getting a lot of emails and messages and posts here in the shout box about the interesting nature, although fairly basic, topic of the kerchunking, and I appreciate your comments. So, where are we at? Any thoughts, any comments, any other issues with it? Or is it just that we should just say, please don't kerchunk? Patience, please, key up. Well, didn't get anything further on this, and I want to point out that when K6JM, when he was talking about his Blue DV for Windows with the Thumb DV during the new gear segment of the roundtable tonight, he did post on the shout box with a link to download the software that's needed to do just what he did. And for those that are looking forward to experimenting with a Blue DV for Windows and their Thumb DV, there's the software to go jump on it and give it a try. So, let's take a break. Well, not literally. I don't want anybody running away. But let's, a little bit more than an hour into the net, this is the time to do the open segment of the roundtable. We do it at the beginning sometimes. We do it at the end, towards the conclusion of the roundtable. Tonight we're going to do it in the middle. And that is an open segment for you to ask questions related to what we do here, hopefully, to seek answers from those that perhaps can help, as well as to suggest topics that you haven't heard or would like to hear about, especially if they're not going to carry on for hours and hours, or topics that perhaps you'd like to get started on another roundtable. But right now, it's your turn to direct what we're going to talk about here on the roundtable, and you do so by keying up. Please do so now.
VA7SS.
VA7SSM. Welcome to the roundtable. Go ahead.
Good evening, Air Control, and everybody else on the net. I haven't been been to the D-Star Roundtable for quite some time. Probably this is my second time checking in, and I'm coming through the XLX system on DMR this evening. The D-Star radio's charging. Just great comments, and I guess the question that I had, it's more of a technical question. Can we write the beaconing out of the firmware for the D-Star radios? Meaning, can it still beacon, but just not open the squelch, if you will, on the radios? Is that possible?
I'm not sure I follow you. You said related to beaconing, which is a feature on the radios, and so you opening the squelch. I missed the connection, or I didn't hear you correctly, and I'm sorry. I think you said your name is Stephen. Just help me out a bit on this. Back to you.
Yeah, that's correct. It handles Stephen. So obviously, for many different reasons, people may or may not want their radio to beacon the GPS data, and that's fine that it does. But is there any way that ICOM can maybe change the firmware so that the rest of us don't have to hear it beacon? I'd have to open the squelch, if you will, or open the speaker of the radio to actually transmit that data. There are other radio systems that transmit data in the background that don't open the speaker on the radios. So I was just wondering if that's a change that we could possibly ask ICOM for, and would it benefit us?
Oh, okay, I got you now. So, all right, who'd like to answer that? There's a seemingly obvious answer and one that's less so. Stations, please. Yeah.
W6KD.
W6KD, go ahead.
Well, the short answer is it's really not practical. There are so many different kinds of radios out there, and most, if not all, of the ICOMs are not capable of being flashed to a new firmware that would recognize some change in the protocol to do that. Plus, there's all the infrastructure out there as well. Unfortunately, the beaconing, as it's implemented in the ICOM radios from the very first D-Star radios on, it's a simple key up. And yes, the GPS data is embedded in the low speed data part of the data stream, but it's indistinguishable from a regular key up with GPS data also in the stream. In other words, if you have your GPS turned on in the radio and you're talking to somebody, the difference between the two is well, it's just not discernible. Yeah, you could probably code a radio so that, or even the infrastructure for that matter, so that a Kerchunk with GPS data in it would be ignored and not passed on. Maybe that's not a bad idea at the infrastructure level. But yeah, the problem you run into anytime you want to make a change like that is you gotta somehow figure out how you make it backward compatible to radios going back to the beginning of D-Star and to all the various different types of hotspots, or gateways anyway, hotspots, reflectors, repeaters, etc. So it's a pretty big task to even make minor changes protocol-wise. So not a bad idea, but a much bigger job than it sounds.
All right, Bob, thanks. Any other comments about eliminating beaconing? And of course, your GPS is transmitted with push to talk as a default setting, and chunking is turned on by default. You can certainly turn that off as well. There are ways by individual stations deciding either not to transmit it and or not to receive it. You can't do much about stations that turn off the ICOM for chunking. But any other thoughts on this? Please be up.
KJ60.
KJ6OOV. Go ahead.
Mike in the net. I know my D-Star radios, in terms of transmitting GPS data, are configurable. I can either turn it on or off, and if I want to turn it on, I have a setting for only transmit the GPS data on a PTT push, or I can set it to beacon automatically, whether I key up or not. I forget whether it's by the minute or what. That's the objectionable one that I've goofed on and left on occasionally. If I just want to beacon my position automatically every few minutes to see if I show up on an APRS plot, that's the offensive one. Leave that off. And on my ICOM radios, you don't need firmware changes to turn that off. It's just a setting and the configuration of the radio. KJ60OV, back to net.
Of course, what you say is true, Fred, and, I mean, beaconing automatically by intervals, and I think most of the stations probably don't realize they have it set that way. It's one way of probably noticing that someone has a new radio and decided to run through all the default settings and, change things around, not understanding that they're doing that, but then some do it on purpose, and there is a purpose for beaconing, and auto beaconing, I should say, not PTT beaconing. And sometimes we have fun with that. But if you're on a linked system, boy, oh boy, you got to disconnect from the system and operate in local mode, because as long as you're on a repeater or a single reflector, it's going to get reported. Although I don't know if every reflector would do that. Actually, it's not a reflector function. That's a gateway function. So it's going to get reported, but either by your gateway or by the gateway of a repeater. And in effect, your access point, your hotspot's a gateway of sorts. But that's a good way to get bounced off of a linked system. But it is fun. And I've had stations that I've followed on the APRS maps. And, I enjoyed having them beacon. Sometimes guys would be on ships, they'll be up in airplanes, and they'd be like dropping crumbs, and it is fun. Just not on a linked system of any sort. So, appreciate your comment. Anything further VA7SSM's question, as well as this kind of side topic that's related, please, Kip. All right, we appreciate the question, and thanks for being with us, Stephen. All right, so we're in the open segment. We're looking for questions of a technical nature, or, well, I guess it could be non-technical, but related to the wonderful world of open source and digital voice, and topics, things you'd like to have discussed by those that love to discuss such things. I think this is still a good time, given the number of stations that are connected and gateways that are connected to the dashboards, to get a good answer or even a bad answer, but we'd rather have an answer than none at all. Please be up.
KC8YQ.
KC8YQL. You know, when I call on you, Bill, it's almost like Jeopardy, where you're going to give the answer, and then we're going to see who asked the question. KC8YQL, go ahead.
Is this anything, Mike, like who's on first and who's on second? And we know who's on third. It's got to be Johnny or Bob. Anyway, good evening, you guys, again. I'm going to duck on this one. I hope I'm not going to violate the net rules, but here it goes. I asked this several occasions, and nobody to this point has really given me a conclusive answer. Now as my hotspot's getting hijacked, I don't know that even some repeaters may be having the issues. specific, I'm talking DMR now. So I'm ducking, right? Anyway, static talk groups is getting issued to devices that didn't get them issued. And I put this out on several nets. The only answer I got, well, Grindmaster Master Service knows they got an issue and they're working on it. Well, that's okay. That's good if they're working on it. What was the reason they had to work on it to begin with? Anybody know? That's my question. And even more importantly, we stuck in beaconing here on D-Star or Chunkin specifically, I guess, not really beaconing. Can you imagine that? On a repeater, your repeaters get linked up to a static connection like the 9100 talk group. That's what was popping up most of the time. It was either 9100 or 3100. And of course, I'm just kind of like the one Charlie of D-Star. And like I say, a lot of people say, well, yeah, they know they got a problem. They're working on it. Why was they working on it? I don't know. Maybe somebody else knows. And we'll turn it back to you, KC8YQL.
All right, Bill. Well, your question's an interesting one. I mean, you're not ducking anything. This is the open segment, and of course, DMR is a perfectly acceptable discussion because of the 4K transcoding reflector XLX313 alpha. So let's find out if anyone has an answer to this question that apparently you and others have been struggling with. I've seen this issue come up many times in the Yahoo groups. Stations who can help out or offer opinion and answer, please key up now. Well, I didn't get a response. I know there are a lot of guys on DMR that are listening in. Bill, did you want to try restating it just succinctly and not dive off into other directions? And see if we can't, nail someone or hook someone, I should say, that can help you out. Maybe I did too much talking instead of just calling for answers to your question. KC8YQL, give it another shot, please.
I think I actually have the answer to the question, but I'm afraid to say it. I really don't want to get involved. I don't want to step on anybody's toes. Specific question again was my open spot Shark RF and all three of the Pi hats was all four of those units get hijacked with talk group 9100. Well, let me back up. 91, not 9100, and 3100. And it seems to have settled down. I don't believe that's the case now. It seemed like whatever they did, they must have done it, and everything's all hunky-dory now. But at any rate, I don't know why that was happening. And believe you me, it was happening multiple times each day. I about wore my 4000 disconnect prompt out. And I even reset, soft reset. I hard resetted all the devices, didn't matter. Static talk groups kept getting reissued to my devices. Back to you, Mike. I see Michael, VK5ZEA, is keying up on my gathering spot on Ohio. I'm going to go grab him and tell him to get on over here. KC8YQL, back to that.
Yeah, so Michael, we miss him here. So what do you mean by hijack? KC1QL, back to you real quick before you grab him.
N6HKH is wanting you to come on over here and join us, Mike. Come on over. And I'm going to unkey Mike and go back to the other mic. I'm transmitting to you on DMR and California on D-Star. So VK5ZEA, come and join us. X Reflector 2, KC8YQL. And I'm going to go back to N6HKH now. So hijacking means that whatever static connection I had issued got
issued with another talk group, and I couldn't hear the one that I had in there, Mike. And I leave the open spot on a static connection to the Ohio talk group 3139, which, by the way, I might mention to you guys, we set a record last night. We had 100 check-ins. In fact, I think we had a little over 100 on the Ohio DMR net on 3139, which was pretty good for us. And what else can I tell you? I think I told you everything. Static connections was getting assigned to my devices. When I log in to my self-care site, there they are. 3139 is in there, put in there. But also 91 was getting put in there automatically, and so is 3100. Does that help you out, Mike? Do you need more information? Does that help? TC8YQL, back to you, sir.
Well, I'm hoping it helps out those listening that can comment on, maybe, answer your question, because we didn't get any responses before. So stations who can, explain this to Bill, has the problem stopped? Is it continuing? Are you threatening Brandmeister? Is it something that, we just have to live with? Stations, please key up.
W6K.
W6KD, go ahead.
Yeah, Mike, I observed the same thing a few days ago, actually about a week and a half ago. A bunch of Italian stations coming through when I had my one of my hotspots set on, one of the Colorado talk groups. And from my perspective, it's clearly a Brandmeister infrastructure problem. It's going to have to be solved programmatically in the servers there. It appeared to me, and I didn't do a whole lot of chasing on it, but it appeared to me that I was getting traffic coming in on talk group 9, which is which is in my receive list for using MMDVM hotspots. It's not a necessity with the open spot, and all I did was take out the receive list on some of the channels, and that made it go away. But it shouldn't have been there in the first place. But there's nothing I don't think that can be done at the user level. This was a problem of the wrong traffic being sent by the server out to the hotspot. So I would look towards the sysops at Brandmeister to fix that one. W6KD.
All right, Bob, thank you. Anyone else? Please key up.
AB3XT.
AB3XT. Go ahead.
Hey, good evening, Mike and the net. Just wanted to make a quick comment, Andy, here in Philly. It's kind of more of a DMR issue, but now that the two systems are bleeding into each other, it's become, I guess, a D-Star issue. There's talk groups that are on DMR that are pushed to talk. So a lot of times, I guess, I hear people keying up on DMR, probably opening up their repeaters so that they can hear the talk group. So, that's just another issue that's out there now. Back to you, Mike.
All right. I'm glad you mentioned that. Stations, please key up. Alrighty, apparently that's going to be it on that issue, and thanks, Bo, for bringing that up. So, we're still in the open segment looking for questions that you've thought about and wanted to have answered, and maybe have tried in other locations. We famously are referred to, let's say this correctly. Other nets sometimes that to talk about these kinds of subjects just don't have answers for their nets listeners. They, of course, are mostly call-in nets and check-in nets. I mean, we do not take check-ins. In fact, we don't like check-ins. We'd rather have stations key up with things to talk about. We could sit here actually and spend a long time going through a roll call or taking check-ins, and that doesn't help anybody because we don't get to talk about much when you do that, and that's why we don't do it, never will. But there are nets like that sometimes don't lead to answers, and they say, hey, come on over to the round table, try it over there, and we're happy to provide answers and let you take it back to other nets, other things. We're not picky about that, but we can't get help to you, and when we have people in the know sitting in the sidelines drooling, waiting for a great technical question they can answer unless you ask one. Station, please give.
KN4G W5IEM.
I have KN4GLQ and W5IEM. First, we say welcome to Nick. KN4GLQ, go ahead.
Hi guys, Manette. This is KN4GLQ Nick in Melbourne, Florida. New to the roundtable. Actually, just found the XLX 313 reflector. A buddy of mine, we were having a conversation about a bridge between DMR. We're both familiar with DMR and D-Star, and some quick Googling to basically find if I could find a reflector or something that linked the two of them, and that's how I stumbled upon this reflector and furthermore the roundtable you guys are having here. So I was just hoping that someone could kind of clarify my green understanding of it is, how you might have a QSO between a DMR radio on the Brandmeister network and, a D-Star radio here on the XLX 313 reflector. Just a simple explanation, you need to be in this talk group on Brandmeister and this reflector on D-Star, and you should get connection between would be pretty much all I'm looking for. Again, this is KN4GLQ. Name's Nick, Melbourne, Florida, and back to net. Thanks.
Fair enough, and it's been a while since we've talked about the 4K transcoding server and how it performs, what it does, and how it works, and perhaps we should provide another explanation or another, not so much explanation, but description of, just what you asked about. So, who'd like to answer this one? Please key up.
W6KD.
W6KD. Go ahead.
Okay, well, currently Brandmeister and the Constellation are not interconnected. Brandmeister is, all things DMR are not Brandmeister. And so the XLX 313 has the capability of serving as a here I go, has the capability of serving as a DMR master server. And so to connect DMR to D-Star, you don't go through Brandmeister. You set up your hotspot or your repeater if you're the syshop there, and you use XLX 313 as your DMR master server, and then Talk Group 4001 is analogous to the that's the cross link over to Module A on the D-Star side. 4002 is Module B, 4003 is Module C, all the way up to 4006 right now. We have A through basically A through F are connected, but Module A is interlinked to the D-Star constellation here. So to reiterate, you don't go to Brandmeister. You set your hotspot up with XLX 313 instead of Brandmeister as your DMR master server, and then connect it, and then you key up on Talk Group 4001 to subscribe to that talk group, and then you depending on how your hotspot works, you either well, you generally talk on talk group 9. Some guys have it set up as 2 or 6. It's going to depend on how you have your hotspot configured, but that's the gist of it. Is that the possibility exists in the future to connect Brandmeister up, but that's not a thing right now to the constellation, and there are still some technical hurdles that we have not completely sorted out, and so you know that's a TBD. So back to the net, W6 Kitty.
All right, Bob, thanks. So KN4 GLQ with that. Anything further? Go ahead.
Well, no, that seems to answer all the questions I had of it. I appreciate you guys taking the time to explain it to me. Again, this is KN4 GLQ. I'll go ahead and hand it back over to Ned, and you guys have yourself a good evening.
And you as well. Thanks for being with us tonight. And make note, there may be a time that you'll be able to dial in one of the talk groups that we already have set up with Brandmeister to connect to this constellation of X reflectors through Brandmeister, but not now. It's being looked at, and as Bob explained, some of the hurdles that need to be overcome, but we're working on it. Thanks for being with us. W5IEM, Steve, how are you? Go ahead.
W5IEM. It's been a while, but good to be back on the round table. I always feel like I have like the dumb question that I'm like the dumb kid in the back of the room, like I don't get it. I always have a kind of simple question tonight. I'm going through my RT system software and kind of doing some programming on one of my radios, and I've always wondered why there's a bunch of simplex frequencies in there, but there's not frequency in it. That's what kind of confuses me. It's more of a, it's a specific question about the software, but is there some kind of use for those simplex slots in the software? If anybody knows that, I'd be kind of curious to find out. W5IEM.
Well, let's find out. Why are there simplex slots in the RT Systems programming software? Please key up if you know.
W6KD.
W6KD, go ahead.
I'm not sure we're talking about the same thing here, but I use a simplex. I program a simplex frequency on pretty much all my radios at the end of each bank, so that if I want to mute the radio, it's as simple as basically the first channel in the bank is the CQ for that particular hotspot, and the last channel in the bank is a simplex FM frequency. So if I want to mute the radio, I just turn the knob one click to the left, counterclockwise, to the left, counterclockwise, yeah, and that puts me on an FM simplex frequency, and therefore my, that way the hotspot is not coming through the radio, because I run sometimes 5 or 6 different radios simultaneously, and if they all get cooking at the same time, I just reach up and quickly dial the channel knobs on the ones I'm not using over to the left one notch, and that mutes them effectively. So that's how I use it. That's how I use it. I'm not sure that we're talking about the same thing there. I will tell you that the other thing is on some of the radios, the older ones especially, you've got band A and B, and like on the 2820 and the 92, you can only program D-Star on, I think it's band B. I think band A is FM only, or it's not D-Star. The vocoder is only usable on band B, so it might just be placeholders on that band A as well. But that's my stab at it anyway. W680.
Well, I'm glad you took a stab at it because you never know. Well, let's see if you hit the mark. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that. W5IEM, is that what we're talking about? Or not? Go ahead.
W5IEM. Oh, first off, that is an actual a good use for a simplex slot in there, but I don't think is what this is. What this is on the DR programming on this, because I've gone through and set up like my hotspots. I've got them programmed in as a DR memory, so it just shows up with. I've got the GPS coordinates and everything. So on at home, I can just go to the near repeater and it'll find my hotspot, and I can just use a DR mode to program that. What this is like on some of these repeaters. In the DR programming, it'll have a simplex. It shows up as simplex. There's no frequency in there, but it has like the RPT1, RPT2 info in there. It's got the GPS coordinates for the repeater. It's got all that stuff programmed in, and it's I guess more of a question for RT Systems maybe, and I'm sure they have a pretty good reason. I just don't know what it is. I'm just curious if anybody might know what it is, but that's what I'm looking at on this W5IEM.
Well, I get, well, since if you're setting it up to talk to a hotspot, it's obviously going to be simplex. Maybe they're just, assuming that, and maybe there's some setting that you knowingly or inadvertently checked indicating that you're programming a hotspot as opposed to programming connecting to a reflector or gateway to a repeater. I don't know. Well, with that explanation, is any of the RT Systems programming guys, have you seen this? Do you know why it's there? This is a mystery that we need to resolve. Please, Kia.
KF0LF.
KF0LF. Denny, I know you know the answer to this one. Thanks for being with us. Go ahead.
Well, I probably don't know the answer, but I'll take a stab. I use the DR mode all the time, and I use the simplex frequencies that come with the programming from ICOM. We were using them at Quartz Fest last week, and we use them at Yuma and different ham fests when a bunch of D-Star guys just want to yak around. It's kind of like 146.52 on FM. It's just simplex yak. As far as the RT Systems, if there's slots in there that have no frequencies, and I suspect, you'd stick in your hotspot frequency in there. That's the only explanation I can think of, Mike. Or
well, that makes sense. Slots without frequencies. Why would you presume that it would be a duplex programming? And, I know in RT System you can certainly flip it from simplex to duplex, but when you think about it, it probably makes more sense where if you're going to be putting slots in programming that the user's not filling at present, leaving them simplex makes more sense, especially if you're going to be programming or adding to it by programming through the radio, away from the software connection. Perhaps they're just thinking ahead for us and, trying to make the job easier. I don't know. Any other thoughts before we move on? Please, Kia.
W5IE.
W5IEM, go ahead.
W5IEM. Well, what I'll do, I may call RT Systems if I ever get a chance and just ask them, is there a purpose on those? What I will do want to add on there, if anybody ever tries to program in a hotspot into the DR memories on an ICOM radio, the only way I've ever gotten it to work is weird. You have to tell it that it's a duplex offset with a zero offset. I've tried putting it in as a simplex frequency, and it does not work. I don't know why that is. The only way I can get it to work is to say it's a duplex with a zero offset. So just a heads up if anybody ever tries to do that. It's really convenient when you get it programmed in, though, because you can just flip from repeaters to the hotspots and everything just right off of that, and especially if you put the GPS coordinates like your house or a place you're going to be on a regular basis, you can even tell it's a near repeater and it just pulls it up. But just a weird little thing. But I may investigate a little bit more. I'm just kind of curious, and if I find out, I'll get back on the net sometime. W5IEM, back to net.
Yeah, be sure to let us know what you find out. K6JM, go ahead.
Okay, Mike, before I go farther, I backed down my transmit audio. Is it okay now?
Much improved. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that earlier. Yeah, that's, you stumbled onto a feature of D-Star radios, and it looks like, I used to just say it was an ICOM feature, but it looks like they do it in with the Kenwood D-Star radios also. But when you're in dupe mode, they will honor whatever you have programmed in, or either you in your memories or the DR mode is going to put into the RPT1 and RPT2 values. So you can program those values up all you want, but if you're not in dupe mode, which means obviously simplex, they don't transmit what's in those values you've programmed in your radio, and instead, well, at least on my 51 and 91 and various other ICOM radios, it transmits the letters DIRECT, direct in those two fields. So that's not going to cut it if you're talking to a hotspot that is hoping to get some RPT1 and RPT2 values, and it sure won't cut it if you're talking to a repeater that expects those. So the trick, as people long ago discovered, was, and it's a good trick, you just put it in dupe mode with a zero offset. And that is enough for the radio to say, well, you're in dupe mode, I will honor whatever you programmed into those two fields. And then it'll do what you want. Back to you, Mike, K6JM.
Thanks for that, Jim. You could actually turn the mic gain up just a skosh because you're just a little bit now below the typical user listening here. But it's a big improvement. So, it's this basic question of, for those that are thinking, well, wait a minute, I was trained that you operate simplex with access points and hotspots, and what's this setting it for duplex with zero offset? Jim just partially explained that. It seems to be, important depending upon the device that you're accessing. Is that an appropriate way to describe when you find that simplex with direct in RPT1, RPT2 doesn't work, and you need to, and the device or the repeater demands that you have that it receives a duplex signal, but with zero offset. Is there a standardization to this? And I'm going to give it back to Jim just to see if he has an answer to this as I pose the question for myself and hopefully for others. K6JM, go ahead.
Yeah, the answer is very, very well stated, Mike. And if you go back to the history of D-Star, which isn't that long, but in the early days, all we had was to talk to repeaters with their gateways. And if you wanted the gateway to pass your transmission along out to any connected, let's say, reflector or whatever, even call sign routing, you had to fill in RPT2. And RPT1 was for telling which module you wanted us to go to. So it was required, and if the repeater still is. When hotspots came out, my first hotspots were, I guess, OMDV, but there was a setting there, and also DVAR hotspot software. This all precedes G4 KLX software. There was a setting whether the software should require something valid in RPT2. And then G4KLX came out, and same thing. There's a setting in the software, so it's up to you when you set up your own hotspot whether you want to require it. If you do it, it means you won't get spurious people using your hotspot, but it means that you yourself, if you're using a simplex frequency, will have to do the dupe zero offset so that that requirement can be met. But most hotspots, I think, don't have that requirement. Therefore, nobody worries about it in simplex mode. I wish I could be more clear, but that's the best I could do. Back to you, Mike, K6JM.
W6.
Well, it was clear to me, but let's have just a minute. Let's see if W6KD can make it more clear. Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, to elaborate a little bit, most of the newer hotspot software, in fact, maybe all of it, certainly MMDVM requires the RPT1 and RPT2 fields to be set. A lot of the early hotspot software, including, I believe, Robin's DV Node. No, that was WinDV. I can't remember can't remember the official name of Robin's the DVAP software that comes from iNet Labs, the guys that sell the DVAPs. But that allowed you to operate in simplex mode. The G4KLX suite prior to MMDVM has a switch called RPT1 validation. And most of the images like Maryland and D-Star Commander and Western D-Star, etc., had the RPT validation turned off, which means your radio could work in simplex or duplex mode, either one, and it didn't really care. But Jonathan Naylor, G4KLX, hardwired the validation into MMDVM because it can cause problems leaving it off, particularly with ping-ponging between two nearby gateways on the same frequency, something we've seen from time to time. That puts an end to that. And so, anyway, it's generally a good idea to use it. And yeah, as Jim said, it's a bug, and it's not documented anywhere in the ICOM documentation on any of the radios that I'm aware of. But it works pretty much the same if you have simplex mode set up in the radio programming, then it ignores whatever's in RPT1 and 2, just like Jim said, and it just sends a blank field out in the stream where that data should be. Even though it's programmed in the radio, it doesn't make it into the digital stream coming out of the radio, and then the hotspot won't pass you through because it doesn't see the RPT information that it needs to operate properly. So again, as a matter of course, it's generally a good idea to use it and to set your hotspots up for it. If you've got an older D-Star Commander or whatever, it's just a matter of going into the D-Star repeater config and turning RPT validation on, and then it works the same with your OpenSpot, your MMDVM, and all your older stuff as well.
Oh, I appreciate that, Bob. All right, any further comments? Well, no, let's go back to where we were. We're in the open segment, and, this can be questions that you have about anything you've heard thus far, as well as new questions that you'd like to have posed. And you've seen stations with great experience that have asked what they thought were basic questions, but are interesting to many. And then you have stations that are new to D-Star, perhaps, and are asking questions that actually are something that we haven't talked about in a while, and we appreciate it. So, stations with questions, or if you have a topic you'd like to have discussed, please key up. All right, he didn't see or hear anything, and we appreciate the effort and time and participation for those that in our open segment. We'll close the open segment now for right now. Something that comes up from time to time, as you know, one of the reasons why we have the 4K transcoding reflector is that those in the digital voice modes, well, there's a lot of reasons for it, but the D-Star equipment is expensive, more so than DMR. It has fewer features. The radios don't look as nice. They don't have quite as fancy, carrying cases. Well, the point being is that you can enter into digital voice by a DMR radio and an access point, hotspot, open spot. There's a lot of different ones, spending far less money than you would on D-Star. But then that begs the question for those that have a huge investment in D-Star and preferred still to operate on D-Star, even though while operating on D-Star, at least through our 4K transcoding reflector, you can be heard in DMR or on DMR by those that are operating there. Have you guys that have D-Star radios considered buying a DMR radio? Or maybe attacking digital voice, the open source digital voice as we'd like to describe it. From the other side, has curiosity driven you such, and given the prices and the ever-increasing features at lower cost for DMR radios, enticed you to give it a shot at the other end? If so, what did you think? Stations, please key up.
W6OS.
Well, I was about to say, wow, nobody's interested, but then there's Michael, W6OSO, to the rescue. Welcome to the roundtable. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mike and the group. Difficult question. I'll try to answer it the best I can. I dabbled with DMR when it was first being talked about in Southern California. I bought a Vertex standard radio. A few other people bought them because they were cheap. And this was before the TYTs and some of the lower cost radios hit the market. And quite honestly, to put it in a nutshell, DMR has been such a pain in the butt to program. The computer, the hours of doing files and setting files and redoing files and checking files, that I all but gave it up. It wasn't worth the headache. It wasn't worth the heartburn. D-Star is so much easier, even after you go through the 3 or 4 month learning curve. D-Star is a lot more friendly, user friendly. With a hotspot, you can do a couple key commands and go anywhere. DMR, you're still locked into 16 or 20 channels or whatever channels you have. With a hotspot, I've never been able to get the hotspot to work satisfactory with a DMR radio that I can with the D-Star Commander and a Raspberry Pi and a DD Mega card. So I got out of the DMR business, sold the radio. In fact, I think I still have the radio. It's up in a closet somewhere. But it's just, there's no support for it. The clubs, the advanced clubs that talk to me about the technically advanced, let me break. Those clubs are even less supportive. It's just a quick niche, and I don't want to play in that. I'll stay with the D-Star. Thanks very much. Any questions? I'll be standing by, Mike.
Nope. Just wanted the opinion. You gave it. Thanks, Mike. All right, who else? The dyed-in-the-wool, die-hard, old salt D-Star users, happy with how things are. And did you buy a DMR radio? What do you think? What did you think after you got it? Did you sell off all your D-Star gear? I know stations have. Or did you do like Mike and sell off the DMR radio? Stick them with D-Star. Just looking for your thoughts. Please key up.
K6KB.
And we say good morning to John, K6KD. Go ahead.
Okay, good evening, Mike and the net. I'm kind of getting over a little sore throat, so let's see if this lasts more than a few seconds. I have a different viewpoint. I do agree that the DMR radios are harder to program, but sorry, let me turn down the other. I know that's quite annoying. I realize the DMR radios are harder to program, but I find, depending on the radio, I find the audio quality to be, excellent. I've got a couple of Terras TR-7400s, and they sound better than all my D-Star radios. In terms of handhelds, they sound better than all my D-Star radios. I've also got a TYT MD390, and I'd say probably the same thing about that one too. So they're both very rugged, and so anyway, I like them both. Back to that.
Well, there's a third option that you like both and you keep everything. Thanks, John. Stations, please key up.
N K6JM.
I have N5VRP and K6JM. First, we say howdy to Dennis, N5VRP. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mike and everyone on the net. I just throw in my opinion or my experience, I'll put it that way, my experience with DMR. I do run DMR and D-Star and can connect to this constellation and have, I think a week or two ago. But at any rate, I have a background with P25, so stepping into DMR kind of had to do a little bit of changes in the way of thinking of how to program a DMR radio versus a P25, but very similarities there to a certain degree. I pulled my hair out probably for a few hours and realized the bell went off, the light went off, and was able to master it. And so much so that I have my hotspot set up with a profile for DMR and a profile for D-Star. And if I guess I had a fusion radio, I'd probably have set up for that too, but I don't know that I'm going to get into that. Too many radios, Mike. Any rate, it is a little bit more cumbersome, no doubt about that. But there are places you can reach out to out there. Let me let it drop. There are Facebook pages and some other websites out there for DMR that, DMARC is probably the best one to start with and go from there. But I keep finding more and more all the time. If you just put in DMR as a Google search, you probably find a whole bunch of things on it now. Code plugs, exactly, and then you can sit there and modify them to what you have. I run a
All right, N5VRP fell out. He's probably still talking. Let's just wait for him to realize that he's no longer with us. Please stand by.
Yeah, N5VRP. I think I'm back now. My battery went out on me. Sorry about that. But I run a Shark Open Spot and DMR and D-Star both. So right now I'm running it on the D-Star side. But I made up a profile for D-Star and then another one separately for DMR. And and by the way, the MD380 has 1,000 channels. You can have something like 200 and some odd zones. Yeah, there's 16 channels per zone, but you can have multiple zones. So once you tackle those kind of things, then you can set up for D-Star and one, D-Star connections in one, and tactical channels in another, United States in another, maybe 2 or 3 states in another, different things like that in different zones, to flip between zones. Now, I found out one other thing. Let me let it drop one more time, Mike. One other thing I found out by doing this and stepping through all this is that if you get an MD380 or 390, it's good to put on the MD tools. And it gives you a lot more capability, shows call signs, IDs, and all that, city, state coming across, and all those different things. But it gives you some more options beyond the programming capabilities that the radio came with. It's a firmware upgrade and also a hotspot upgrade, but mostly the 380 or 390s need to be upgraded beyond what the firmware they came with. So I'll hand it back to you, Mike. N6 HKH in 5 ERP.
Dennis, thanks for your input. K6JM, your turn. Go ahead.
Okay, Mike. Interesting discussion again. I guess my attitude, first of all, I agree with the general assessment that the DMR radios are harder to program, no matter what good software you get, and it takes a little longer to get your mind around the way you have to think to do that. I personally found just getting a working code plug, even if it wasn't for my area, but just studying it, I was able to kind of figure out what I had to do for my area. But it was a lot of work. It is a lot of work, more so than D-Star radios, particularly if you have RT systems to program your D-Star radios. And I will mention, too, that I didn't hear WB5VKU, Don, come in, but this is one of his pet peeves, is that, DMR sounds great, but he just really dislikes having to program. My comment is that, given all that, even though DMR is quite mature in the commercial world, in the ham world is still pretty young, and we haven't had people come in and make it easier yet, and they're just starting to. And I think that's the trend. I mean, I don't know that D-Star was all that easy. It was still easier than DMR Mark style DMR, but I think we've had more time to have our third parties make it easier, and I think it's going to happen to DMR. And I'm not going to buy a Wireless Holdings DV4 radio, but they've got a deal where it's kind of self-programming, and to some extent, and they can save the programming and restore it with a little cell connection, and it's pretty cool what they're doing. So I think in the long run, DMR is going to get easier. Back to you, Mike, K6JM.
Yeah, indeed. And the CPS programs, while they seem to be, there's none that really cross-manufacture, but since the beginning of putting DMR to use in amateur radio, there's been a consistency, so to speak, across many of this consumer programming software, CPSs, and it's becoming more intuitive. And then again, there's those infamous code plugs, and that's a whole other subject and argument that we won't get into tonight. Jim, appreciate your thoughts. Anyone else, please, Kia? All right, nothing seen or heard. Appreciate your help on this topic. So, I have something that I just was wondering about, and, I don't know if, nobody has contacted me saying, hey, Mike, I've got Super Bowl tickets. Or I'm going to go to the Super Bowl site, and I can't get in. I might be able to get some tickets outside, but I'm going to do the Super Bowl experience, the NFL experience, which is in a location other than the stadium where the Super Bowl is going to be held. But if anyone is going or is involved with or has read up on Super Bowl and the security, are you going to be allowed to bring an HT into a secured zone, be it the NFL Super Bowl experience, which is a huge arena usually, or into the Super Bowl stadium, or for that matter, into any of the NFL-sponsored Super Bowl events where you have to pass through security checks? Can you bring an HT in? Could you talk back to a local D-Star repeater from your seat? Would you be able to bring a portable hotspot that is a pocket Wi-Fi and something that would fit into where you're going to be bundled up, no doubt, so you have lots of pockets available in these huge winter jackets? You could be a walking hotspot. Do you know what the rule is? As a licensed amateur, can they bar you from bringing, let's say, an HT in there? Assuming they know about it, you declare it. Does anybody know? Stations, please key up.
W6KD.
W6KD, go ahead.
Well, Mike, I think anybody that's going to the Super Bowl or any other NFL game probably can just roll their HT up in the knee pad that they use to go down on their knee when the national anthem is playing, and you can probably smuggle it in that way.
Well, of course. Silly me, I hadn't thought about that. Well, aside from smuggling it in, I realize it's late and the guys on the East Coast that might, be bombarded with more Super Bowl information, but I mean, there's a lot of tickets out there. There's a lot of things you can do at a, Super Bowl event, and I'm not saying that the Super Bowl is the world's greatest event. I don't believe that to be the case. And the NFL has hurt themselves for reasons that case the W6KD just explained. But nevertheless, I'm just curious. I mean, is it, and maybe we can expand this even to other public events. Are you being told you can't bring your HT even though you're licensed to use it? Can secured venues for which you purchase the right to attend or be present bar you from having an HT, much as they can bar you? They can't bar you, for example, from having a cell phone. I've never heard of that, except for maybe events involving government officials. Maybe the president was, I don't know, but it seems that if you can bring cell phones in and cameras, why can't you have an HT? I just don't know. Maybe you do. Help me out. Please key up.
K6KD.
K6KD, go ahead.
Okay, well, Mike, the NFL has a clear bag policy where you can, bring things in that'll fit within I forget the capacity, but usually about a 6-inch by 6-inch clear bag. And of course, cell phones can be brought in. Laptop computers are prohibited. It says radios are prohibited. And I think, they probably just mean the regular, consumer radios. Cameras with lenses longer than 6 inches are prohibited. Camera bags are prohibited. My guess is it's probably not permitted, but I'm sure that there's nothing that would specify an HT one way or the other. But since laptop computers are prohibited and radios are prohibited. I think it's probably a fair guess that HTs would be prohibited as well.
Well, that is so odd because, I mean, clear plastic bag, it's almost like you're boarding an airplane. And I understand that this event like this is a target for terrorists, or potentially, well, at least they're thinking about it. They, hopefully, are going to be stopped miles away. But still, that is so, I hadn't heard that. And the last time I went to a secured event where the only thing you could bring in was in a clear plastic bag was a long, long time ago, and it was a very unique event. I don't even know why I'm mentioning it because it's not relevant. But anyway, that's wild. Is there a website that describes, John, that you can put on the shout box, the security requirements of attendees? Because it seems like maybe you're taking a look at that. And plus, I thought it'd just be fun to see if anybody is, in fact, going to the Super Bowl and what they plan to bring with them. See, that's a shame. I mean, I would like to have somebody be able to connect to the constellation from the Super Bowl, and even though it may be so loud that we would never hear you, we would see your call sign, and it might be fun. There was a time on link systems, and far before we got into reflectors, that well, that's not true. When it was D plus only, and thank God it's no longer only D plus. But it was fun to have people report in from vacation sites and trips, and we had guys, WB5EKU was a regular whenever he traveled. He'd key up and say he's here, and you just don't hear that as much. And I don't know if it's because people just don't think about it anymore. It isn't that big of a deal to them, or is it the security that's stopping them from bringing the gear in they would need to connect to a reflector to be a walking hotspot of sorts, which, frankly, it could all fit into a pocket or into, the clothing around your knee pads. So it just was something that came to mind I thought might be worth discussing. Maybe not. Well, let's find out. Stations, please be up.
C7LEE.
Hey, Ted, thanks for keying up. I know how much you like to sneak into places with gear that's illegal, and so your expertise is welcome on this one. BE7LEE, go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Yes, this is a sensitive subject, especially with me, someone who's to be involved in high security and carry fully automatic weapons, and that, so, I'm going on a cruise through the Middle East, through the Straits of Malacca, the Aden Gulf, where NATO's standing fleet is to protect ships from Somalian pirates, and stuff like that. I book on Royal Caribbean Cruise Line, and in the contract, in big black bold letters, no amateur equipment allowed. I've been taking amateur radio equipment aboard, the MSC, aboard Holland America, Carnival, what was the most, Norwegian, for my running, there's another one. Anyways, I was listening to Southern Mediterranean. I collect the maps from APRS of my travels. I use them in my presentations about APRS as I travel through Panama Canal, Europe. So, and that the reason now I've been invited, I asked, and they did a little security check on me, I suppose, with Interpol, and I gone through the communications center. Because I used to operate radios, and I have all these other radio licenses on deep sea vessels there, and I know all the procedures and everything. So I call this facade security, and they want to, well, now,
there is a possibility, yes, of we have the Hells Angels in the Vancouver area. This is suspicion of mine, Frank. This is suspicion of mine using amateur equipment to hunt and track down their enemies and target certain ones. It's a little more professional because it prevents accidental civilian death, which we already had a few last month. And that, so this is one of my suspicions, and that I've let the police know about this, and they're studying it right now. And that, but anyways, getting off of topic, so yes, so that's the reason why I think they won't let, because there's a slim possibility we could be one of the bad guys. So in order to protect 99% of the population, or 99.9, because 0.1% may be a terrorist and use amateur equipment, the other portion, 99.9%, has suffered. So looking back in history, Osama bin Laden, I guess you remember him, he has won the first prize by hitting 3 out of 4 of his targets, 75% accuracy. He has won second prize by forcing us to change our ways to adapt. And he has won the third prize for making us pay for all this security. That's my little opinion. This is EE7LEE.
Well, that's pretty interesting. The only problem is that if it's the GPS beaconing on your radio that they're worried about, there isn't a ship in the world that can't be tracked. Absent, they don't need amateur radio gear to be sending off their location, because you can find most every ship in the world easily. As far as communication, I can't think of a worse way to communicate with your evil twins that you want to have come on board than amateur radio. Although I guess it would be a series of frequencies that wouldn't normally be observed or monitored. But I don't know. I just, it doesn't make sense to me. Plus, it takes all the fun out of the actual purpose for beaconing, that is dropping crumbs and showing your tracks and following yourself on APRS. And when you get there, that is your location, you can look back at where you've been, especially when you're, on a cruise and there's not a lot of signposts and markers in the middle of the ocean that would lead you to say, I remember being there, unlike being on the road. So, well, I appreciate your thoughts on that, and something to think about. But the more limitations that are placed on our ability to travel with amateur gear takes the fun out of the hobby, and quite frankly is outrageous and should be stopped immediately. First by protesting and not taking any trips where that kind of limitation occurs. So all of you should cancel those trips. Well, don't listen to me. Well, you are listening to me, but you know what I mean. Stations, please key up.
KC5ALH.
KC5ALH. Thanks for joining us. What do you think?
Hey there, Mike. Well, I'm a ham, so of course I don't think that ham radios ought to be prohibited. I think we ought to be able to exercise our federal license and talk in there. If you get caught doing something else, it could be a different story, but I don't know. I'm just, I can take my HT on an airplane, even after 911. I can still do that. They check it, by all means, but I can take it. I take it on board every time I've gone. And that requires pretty serious security. So, no, I think it will be prohibited, though. The answer is will it or will it not, and I think it would be. But no, I'm not in favor of it. I wish it wasn't. I would be in favor of it not being prohibited. But remember another thing. They don't want radios in there, commercial AM, FM broadcast radios. And just think, most of our HTs have the capability of going onto those bands and becoming, an FM or AM radio. So, in a sense, someone that took an HT in there would, inadvertently, they would have a radio that could tune in the AM and the FM as well. So, just something else to think about. KC5 ALH, Big Spring. All right, Paul. Well, that does make sense, and if you're talking about the Super Bowl or similar events, they don't want you listening in on what's going on there because it's secret, as opposed to, let's say, NASCAR racing, where they want you to listen into everything. In fact, they rent and sell, of course, a scanner receivers, but still, all of that radio traffic, secret or otherwise, is something you can listen to because it's, all open. On the NFL, everything is closed. They don't want you to listen to anything, and they don't want to give you a radio that might be able to transmit it. I'm still a little suspicious about the inability to bring just an ordinary AM, FM broadcast, radio to perhaps listen to a play-by-play, like in baseball games. While, you can't watch it on the video and nobody's calling it because you're watching it yourself. A lot of people, as you know, put the AM broadcast station of the play-by-play announcer for the baseball teams, they put them in their ears so you can, listen to what, especially if you're in the nosebleed section, find out why play stopped, find out why the umpires are huddling. It's not necessarily obvious. And I think it would be an enhancement to your Super Bowl experience, although there are some that think the best way to enhance your Super Bowl experience is to not be there and not watch it. But that's the path. All right, any final thoughts? Stations, please, Kia. All right, nothing seen or heard. So we've been running about 2.5 hours, and you know me, I can run on all night or cut it off right now. But I think that probably we should consider closing the net. I say that only in the sense that I don't have any other topics that I can start without carrying us on into the wee hours, and that just serves no purpose except for those that are now getting up and starting to listen to us and who are up into the wee hours. So I'm going to call for stations who have anything for the Thursday night D-Star Roundtable before we bring it to a close, and that would include those that have been waiting for an opportunity to key up and talk a little bit about something of importance to them, or maybe throw a tidbit out or a remark about something you've heard this far, and those that sit on their hands because they won't participate in this net until we're just about ready to close it. But either way, it doesn't matter. I'll take your call, I'll take your input. But fair warning, stations, please key up.
N5VR.
N5VRP, go ahead.
Well, Mike, I thought before you jumped out and closed everything down that I would see if I'm making it okay and if I sound okay and all that, because I'm coming to you right now instead of the D-Star way. I'm coming through you through the transcoder with my MD380 DMR radio. So I thought I'd throw that in 5 years back to that.
You sound fine to me, and I probably would jump on over to 313 to see if you're on the dashboard, but no, you're doing fine, Dennis, and thanks for checking in from there as well. Well, we don't take check-ins. Well, we do from you, because you've been with us forever.
And even when we were in the aging and ancient, REF system. Thanks, thanks for keying up. Stations, please key up. Anything further for the roundtable? Last chance. Key up now, or I'm heading down the hall. Well, seeing nothing, hearing nothing, I guess we're done. So let me thank everyone, as I always do, but it's important to me to say this, that those stations that participate in the roundtable make the roundtable great, and without your participation, there would be no roundtable. So thanks to each and every one of you. I occasionally like to give the call signs of the stations that make this roundtable possible, that administer the constellation of X reflectors, and that support and provide guidance and equipment and gear without remuneration for the Kings of Digital system. I cannot do this roundtable by myself, as you can well imagine, and I rely on others to help me out. And those stations are W6KD, K6KD, KK6MYS, WB5EKU, and WA6JFK. We're here every Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific, 0300. Come on over and visit us on the constellation of X reflectors anytime you'd like, especially if you're bored at your usual reflector or system location. Now, the shout box will be cleaned up and moved over to the shout box history shortly after we close, leaving a clean slate, but that slate of the shout box is there 24/7 for you to add comments, provide information to things that you've heard to supplement the topics that we discussed tonight, as well as to suggest topics that we can entertain here on the net. You can also email me if you don't want to sound off on topics or observations on the shout box that will be publicly at n6hkh@me.com. I look forward to hearing your comments and suggestions and topics. The podcast will be up, courtesy of KK6MYS, without much delay, but it'll probably be Friday, which to me, Friday is tomorrow. I'm still sitting here on a Thursday in the early morning hours, and, he puts a lot of work in cleaning that podcast up and making it pristine. So, also, before I forget, check out the nets that air regularly. They're scheduled on the constellation of X reflectors. If you go to the top, midway down the roundtable forum board, you see a link that, let me make sure I get it right. It says Constellation Nets listed here. Click on that, and it'll take you to the listing of the nets, and they're moving right along and gaining a lot of speed, and they're worth spending some time if you have the time and you like to listen to nets like I do. So I'm going to head down the hall, take a break, but there'll be stations I'm sure that will linger here on the constellation if you wish to talk to them. And with that, you guys have a great weekend. Looking forward to talking to you on D-Star, N6HKH. Good night.